My name is London. I am here filming live from the Ezze offices with a special guest, a special former friend, Taryn, the TheThriftLord. Taryn, how you doing?
What's up, man? I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
It feels good to be back home with
To be back home.
right?
Yeah. This was never my home. You guys, I never got any of this treatment. Never got some of the fancy place.
Well, you're here now,
I am here now.
and we're happy to have you. And we're here to kind of talk about what you've been cooking up these last few months.
Cool.
How about you kind of give us a brief overview as to what you've been working on and how you got to this point?
Okay. So it's kind of like been multiple ideas that were kind of like generally surrounding, and then they all kind of came together and formed like a big idea. But once I like started kind of like selling to like higher profile like people, I knew I had to start like transitioning my business, because like at that point, like we were in Texas and I was doing like the rags and my wholesale and like all of that. Like it was just constant work, easy, like nothing crazy. And then I started, like I got my like relationship with Travis and some other people, and started like selling to a lot, pretty much like all of like the celebrity or like higher profile like clients that I was getting. Like all of them were in LA, like I'm from LA, like I started out here, and the rags, like my business out there, like I was able to kind of like start structuring it to where I could manage it from farther away. And so it kind of just got to a point to where it's like I have to like jump on the opportunity of like going back to LA, capitalizing on my relationships, because like you can't capitalize on relationships hundreds of miles away, like over the phone, like you can only do so much. So that's kind of like where the plotting started. And then I came up with like 884, which is like the kind of like clientele, like personal shopping, like experience that I do for like all of my clients. And then once I was out here and doing that, it became very apparent that I had to start like, I had to make it bigger than selling t-shirts and like selling clothes in general. And it had to start becoming about me, because now it's like I'm getting introduced to people as me, like as like TheThriftLord, like, oh, this is my vintage guy, like TheThriftLord Taryn, da-da-da. And like, it just became very apparent, like I had to like brand my name, and like I had to like set myself apart from a fucking Green Day shirt or like a Kurt Cobain shirt. Like you could get that anywhere, but like it's about the experience and like having your guy, and like that matters so much more in the long run. And I played with like the whole like marketing and branding idea for a few months, growing, and it turned into this.
Why is it's interesting that you made the decision to transition into a more brand-based vintage product, right?
Yeah.
Why did you decide to go into that direction rather than to kind of continue doing what you were already doing, which was successful? I'm curious as to what the thought process was like for you deciding to make that turn.
Like for the branding?
Yeah.
So vintage is like in a very transitional period right now. Like we're coming down from like crazy highs. Like we went for like 2 years of the same things over and over and over again, like lives just getting pushed in your face, like expensive t-shirts getting pushed in your face, like everyone was consuming the same thing repetitively, and like people, like that gets boring, and like people will like get over it. And as somebody who has always kind of switched up how they sold stuff, like it's just very obvious and very apparent that like stuff doesn't stay around. Like you have to constantly be switching up. But like after seeing what happened during like the COVID like boom and tees and like vintage in general, honestly, I saw a very apparent transition to like where vintage is going. And
where is that?
I just think vintage is gonna, like, I think that was its time of to where it didn't matter. Like it was about the shirts.
The
And
COVID.
yeah, like the
skyrocketing
live
COVID.
hype to where it didn't matter who you were. All that mattered was like, oh, you had a fucking rap tee, like I'm gonna spend $2,000 on it. And like vintage was never like that. Like vintage was kind of like, if you knew, you knew. Like when it was really small, like before that blow up, it was like only certain people truly knew the value of shirts, and only certain people could sell certain shirts for certain amounts of money. Like it was very like gate kept, and like it was just very like those small accounts, like they couldn't do that. Like that's just how it was.
Do you think the skyrocketing times, the bubble, quote unquote, of that whole COVID period that was really like championed by Chris at 1980 something Co. Do you think that was good for vintage, or do you think that was a step backwards for the space?
No, I think it was great. Like I think it onboarded a lot of people, whether like those people were the best of people, it doesn't really matter. Like it onboarded a lot of people, it made shirts worth a lot of money, it brought the market up, it allowed people that were truly established to make a fuck ton of money, which is always good for every type of market. And the people that capitalized on it and didn't get caught like holding a bag, and they didn't get caught holding on too long because they knew better, like it was great for them. But I mean, just like any other volatile market, like there are people that lost, there are people that won, but in the long run, like it onboarded a lot of people. It got a lot of younger people interested in vintage, in selling vintage, and taking risks, like running their own business, and like that's always a good thing. And there's going to be people that stick around, and there's going to be people that came in during that time that are now maturing, coming out of that time, and they're learning, and they're going to come up with the next best idea. Or like somebody that maybe like somebody like me, or somebody that's been doing it for since before then, like maybe they're going to be able to kind of use that as inspiration to come up with another idea. Like it worked for a reason. Like something working is never a bad thing, no matter what. But like back to like answer like the question before, like it pretty much like the reason why like I started branding pretty much is I think vintage is going to start becoming about like who you are. And like it's not going to be about the shirts you have, it's not going to be about like what you sell, like it's going to be about how you sell it, who you are as a seller, who you are as a business, what you stand for, like the clients you have, like the connects you have, like the relationships you have. Like it's going to become very personal again. Like it had its moment of like to where people just wanted to consume t-shirts, but like it's going to come back to where it's like I want to know the guy I'm buying my shirts from. And like that's why like my clients like me, is because I'm with them in person. Like I know them, they know me. Like it's not just like you're buying a t-shirt on a live and it's getting shipped to you in a poly mailer and it's like dirty, or it takes 3 weeks, or like it's just wrinkly and it's just like a fucking little bag. Like there's a lot more to it. I mean, it's business. Like, and there's nothing wrong with like selling shirts like that. I mean, I did it for literally up until now. Like, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I think like you always have to like adapt and continue to grow, and like just I think that that's where it's gonna go, is like towards like making it about it's branding yourself. It's no different than like TikTok, what TikTokers do. Like it's just branding yourself. And I've been doing this long enough. I have the experience, like I have the relationships, like, and it's time to like market myself and like invest in myself and like make money off of me, not a fucking shirt. Like
yeah, that's interesting you say that, like that idea of making money off of you. I think most 99% of people within the vintage community kind of are basing their business model off the product they find and just repackaging it and selling it, right?
Yeah.
So what do you have any advice, like if you were to talk to someone that kind of wanted to take that next leap into that tier one of sellers within the vintage space, like what would you tell them?
What do you like? Wait, what do you mean? Like tier one as in what?
I would consider yourself now at this point, especially with the brand that you're building, like kind of a tier one type seller. You, Sean, there's probably a couple other names I would throw in there, right?
So you mean like more like branded?
Exactly. Sean's kind of doing something very similar
Yeah.
in that like it's really about who Sean Witherspoon is more so than it is like the product in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Product's still great, but I see you kind of trying to take like a similar step with regards to the persona driving the product, I guess.
Yeah. Like what I would say to somebody.
How do you basically put someone on? Like, what would you tell someone that wanted to kind of take that next step in that progressive business direction, like you're taking?
I think it's all about just like trying. Like, think of something that no one's doing or that you feel like no one's done maybe right yet, and just like attempt it. I mean, that's like one of those things that I always like respected about like Bidstitch, was that like all of us attempted something, and it doesn't matter whether it was a shit show. It doesn't matter whether it didn't go as well as it could have. It doesn't matter whether it worked or didn't work, or whether people fucking hated it or loved it or anything. It's like, it's about attempting something bigger than what you're doing at the time. So it's like, my advice to them would just be like, think of something you truly believe in and you feel confident in, and just fucking try. Like, attempt it. Like, you're gonna know pretty, like, in my opinion, you know pretty early on whether you truly believe in it, or like whether you think it'll work or it won't work. And if you truly believe in it and you think it works, just keep trying. And like,
do you think that's hard given the environment, right? Like, I feel like there's a decent amount of gatekeeping that happens, and you know, a lot of people from the outside looking in see this as somewhat of like a toxic environment, right?
It definitely is.
Do you find that the vintage space is probably a harder environment to make those progressive business leaps that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think vintage is very new still. So like, and it's still very like amateur. It's still very new. It's a new market. It's a new form of like, if you look at it as like a collectible, or like you like to collect, like it's a new market of collecting. It's a new market of selling. Like, vintage is becoming more and more popular than ever. Like, the whole sustainability aspect of it, just like young kids being entrepreneurial and like thrifting to make money. Like, the whole idea is like a pretty new concept. So it's really hard right now because so many people, like, I feel like kind of lack the creative drive to like do something different than everyone else and innovate. And like, people are very comfortable in vintage. So like, the people that do lives, that's their fucking thing. Like, they don't venture out of lives. Like, the people that sell like only rap tees or like high-end stuff, like they don't venture out of that. Like, they don't really try to like push anything new. They don't try to sell it in new ways. It's like, oh, I have my 5 clients that like all buy it, or like I raffle it, or I do this. That's what I'm doing, because I'm not gonna risk fucking it up and like not being able to sell it anymore. But it creates like, everyone's in a stagnant motion, and when everyone's stagnant, like nothing innovative happens and nothing can progress. So it's like, and people in vintage hate it. Like, people in vintage, like,
why do you think that is?
Because there's not enough people doing it, to where like people don't appreciate it and people don't respect it. So like, people really only truly appreciate and respect like the same thing that other people are liking. So when you do, like, I could post a fucking flat lay of a fucking heart-shaped box on a concrete floor and people jizz their pants over that shit. But like, if you do something highly produced and you do something really fucking dope, or like high-end looking, like you do something that like Louis or Chanel would produce, or like a high-end streetwear company, like literally anything, like people don't fuck with it. Like, you could put it on like you could put something on fucking Bella Hadid, a crazy ass shirt, and like you'd spend $50,000 on a photo shoot, and like that shit'll get 5 likes. No one cares. But you throw that shit on a fucking floor like everyone else, 5,000 likes.
Interesting you say that. So is your brand, the TheThriftLord, and the clothing that you're producing, is that sort of your attempt to kind of reach that upper echelon of like the Chanel, the Louis sort of a vintage? Is that kind of your goal? Do you see it in the same, I guess, tier?
I think I'm not gonna say like maybe me. I think I could do it, like if I make the right moves and I do the right things. But I wanted to do something that not that many people have done yet. And I can only say so much, because like, I already know people are gonna take this as a very face level, like everything I say, like very like literally, and like there's a lot of things planned and behind the scenes that like I can't talk about because that's gonna be the shit that like fucking works. So everyone's gonna look at it as this guy put fucking tags in t-shirts. Like that's nothing special, that's nothing, but it's about like the innovating and doing it bigger and bigger and bigger and adding to it, growing the business of it. But I can see it getting there at some point. Like I see vintage being high-end designer clothing. I see it being bigger than that. Because if you really think about it, like what's the pull of designer clothing? Like you have the exclusivity of being the guy that gets invited to buy a Birkin bag. Like you have the high quality of, and like a lot of designer companies aren't even that high quality, but like you have the high quality of like, oh, like this is like the best of the best. And it's like vintage like is just as rare as a lot of the rarest like designer stuff. Like, and vintage is one of the only things that's in like a finite supply. Like if Hermes wants to make Birkin bags, they're making fucking Birkin bags until the day the guy who makes Birkin bags dies. Like they're making them shits. But like there's only so many fucking like even heart-shaped boxes, there's a lot of them, but there's only so many of them to where like as the years go by and they're destroyed, collected, thrown in the dump, like fucking anything that happens with them, like it's gonna run out. Like original heart-shaped box t-shirts will run out at some point. Like the more and more people that get into it for collecting purposes and they're like hoard shit, and like trust me, there's a lot of hoarders. Like once you venture out of like Instagram vintage and you start meeting people that like have like money and they look at it as like a passion and they're not like trying to sell it and like make money off of it, bro, they hoard that shit. Like storage units full of t-shirts, and they're people that like you would never even know they have t-shirts. Like they might wear vintage, but like it's not like they're a vintage seller. So it's completely different. And it's like it'll run out. And so there's no reason it shouldn't be looked at as just as like high end as any type of designer brand, because designer brands just copy this shit. Like all their inspiration comes from this. Just like Carhartt, like double knees, like work pants, double knees, the utilitarian clothing, like that stuff became cool in vintage, like a year ago about? What would you say?
Yeah.
And then now you see brands like Balenciaga doing the super baggy denim. So it's like, that's like the whole skate culture and like the hip hop culture of like the 90s, that was cool. But like getting back to like the double knees and stuff, like you see Louis making double knees right now. You see places like Gallery Department, which use like vintage, but like they're making double knees right now. You see Carhartt making double knees right now. It's like vintage is ahead of all of it. So it's like what's cool in vintage is cool, and it's like you don't have to put it through production. So like if something is cool in vintage, it can be bought at that second. Like mohair sweaters are cool right now. People are buying mohair sweaters. But all those designer companies that are taking inspiration from vintage and what's cool in vintage, they have to put all that shit into production. So vintage is like a year ahead, 2 years ahead of everything. So it's like the only thing holding it back from being bigger or at the same level as all those companies are the people selling it.
So I'm curious, do you think, I mean, most of the products you're going to be putting out in the next month or so are Carhartt. Do you think that they're having their moment in the sun right now, or?
I think that they've been having their moment, and the reason I chose like Carhartt pants as like the first thing to drop, because I could have went full fucking Terran ThriftLord and did a bunch of fucking crazy ass t-shirts. Like I could have done it, and like that will be dropped. Obviously, I have to, but like Carhartt work pants are something that's been cool in vintage, so vintage people like them, vintage people wear them, but they're also now cool in fashion, to where all of the fashion heads, like they think that they're dope, and like they might have the Louis ones, they might have the Chrome Hearts ones, but then they're gonna see the vintage ones and be like, oh, like that's where this shit came from, like I want those, like I like that they're all fucked up, I like that they're distressed, like I like that. Some people will like them because they're fucking Carhartt, like for whatever reasons they like them, like, and they're perfect like staple pieces. Like anyone can wear them, they look dope, they go with pretty much anything, like they're sick. Like I mean, I got you in them, and like did you ever wear double knees before?
Never.
Yeah, and it's like London came over and he saw like all of the double knees I had, he tried some on, and every person that puts them on that has never worn them falls in love with them. Everyone. and that's why they're popular. Let
me ask you another question then. I guess with the ThriftLord brand and the clothing that you're putting out, the product you're putting out, is it geared towards a vintage audience, or are you trying to break more so into a mainstream consumer? Right?
I'm trying to break into like fashion, like, and I don't mean that as in like I'm trying to break into it. I want vintage to break into it. Like, I'm not pressed over me. Like, I know like I could go, like if I failed at this and no one fucking cared and no one bought it, I could go back to selling t-shirts. Like, it's fine. Like, I'm cool. Like, I'm chilling. But all I've ever done is vintage. Like, I've done it since I was like a teenager. It's the only job I've ever had. It's all I've ever done. And so I respect vintage. Like, it's not about me. It's not about like, I think I'm better than anyone. It's not about, I think I'm the only one that can do this. Like, I just think that vintage could be there. No one else is doing it. Somebody needs to do it, and I want to see it there. So it's just my attempt at like, maybe somebody else will get inspired by it and they'll be like, yo, I want to try that. And then they fucking murder my shit. And like, they fucking kill it. And they're the ones that do it.
But you're
and it's
willing
like,
to take that because it overall progresses.
I'm going to be fine either way. Like, I hope that within a year somebody comes out and they fucking kill it. Because that means it's better for vintage. But in the long run, yeah, like I'm hoping that it gets to that point. Like,
I'm curious. I think you more so than any other vintage seller has the most polarizing of opinions on who you are as a person.
Why?
You got people that are disciples of the Lord, and you got some people that don't take too kindly to you.
Yeah.
What do you think is probably the most misunderstood thing about who you are, and why do you think those opinions even emerge?
That's a good question. I think everyone's opinion of me is valid. I think everyone's opinion, like, not saying it's right. I think that people base their opinions on things that they see and things that they feel, and like they're entitled to that opinion. Like,
do you feel
I'm not
like
going to tell them that they're fucking wrong. Like, even if they are, like, that's not going to change their mind. Like, so if people like don't like me because they think I'm a cocky asshole, like, or I think I'm like arrogant, or I think I'm right, or I think I'm better, or whatever, like, I would just rebuttal that with like, I'm confident in what I think, and like, I know I have the experience to like back my words, and even if you think I'm wrong, like, I think I'm right just like you think you're right, and like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm not afraid to voice my opinions. I'm not afraid to confidently state what I believe, and people don't fuck with that. People don't like it. But at the flip side, like, people really like that, and I think that's why a lot of people really like me, is because I'm not afraid to voice my opinions. I'm not afraid to be like, that dude's fucking lame. Like, I'm not afraid to be like, oh, that he's doing some sus shit. He's doing this for this reason. I believe that. Or like, I'm doing this because of this. Or people used to get mad at me because I would always like say I kind of started shit. Like, I started raffles, or like I started whatever, even though I did. Like, and people are gonna get mad about it, but it's the fucking truth. Like, I don't know what you want from me. So it's like, people don't like that shit. People want like the yes men that are like, I want to be friends with everyone. Like, I want everyone to like me. I don't want to make anyone mad. And it's like, that's not real life. Like, Instagram isn't real life. And some people are real on Instagram. Some people are truthful, and some people want you to believe what they want you to believe.
Are you the most influential seller in the vintage community? Honestly.
I knew I was going to turn into some shit like that. I don't know. I think that I think there's only a handful of people that, I don't want to really say influential, but I think there's only a handful of vintage sellers that are innovative, and like, they try new shit, and they like try to push the boundaries, and they do their fucking thing, and they're unique about it. And in my opinion, all those people are influential. Like, there are people that like, I think do a really good job. And I don't think that there's anyone that like stands apart. Like, somebody could like, if let's say like somebody said I was and like tried to argue my side, like, there are things that like people might find influential or whatever about me that other people think is fucking stupid. But there's also like somebody else on the flip side that's doing something completely opposite to me that I might think is stupid, but other people find influence in that. So it's like, I think everyone's influential and no one's influential at the same time. But people copy me.
Taryn, tell me, what's the most you've ever sold an article of clothing that you found?
Well, it's a t-shirt, obviously.
Yeah.
I sold a Nirvana tee for $5,000. Nothing like super crazy. Like I know people that have sold, I know you've sold shirts for good amounts of money. The kicker to me is like, I find a lot of my stuff,
So
and
margins or
well, yeah, like,
crazy.
well, not even that, but like I've never been the type, like the most expensive shirt I've ever bought to flip is I paid $1,000 for it. The most expensive shirt I've ever bought for myself, I spent $500 on. So like, I'm not in the game of like buying crazy fucking t-shirts and like making small margins, but like there's big sounding numbers, so they sound like impressive. But I sold a Nirvana tee for $5,000. I sold another Nirvana tee for like $3,500. I sold a Snoop Dogg tee for like $3,500. And then like a plethora of like $1,000 to like $1,500, $2,000 shirts.
Do you still feel some type of attachment or like emotional connection with any of the things that you find, or are you so involved in it at this point where it's kind of like whatever?
I like to, like, I've always described myself to people as a seller. Like, I'm not, and it's not that I don't love vintage, and like I love vintage, but like I've never been the type to like want to collect it. I'm not like a collector. I'm a seller. Like I want to make money. Like I want to, like, I feel like I'm a little bit more like business oriented. So like I want to make money to invest into myself, to do bigger things and make money. Like I've never been, I don't feel any type of personal. I have 2 shirts that I'll never sell. One of them is like my bootleg Fuji's tee that I got in my dead stock hit with Anthony, and that's just like the only sentimental shirt towards, like, I feel. And then I have a Nirvana, like a crazy ass Nirvana in utero bootleg, and it's like a 2X, it's big, and
Not a Bon Jovi.
yeah, that one. And I got that at Rose Bowl from a homie of mine. That's the shirt I paid $500 for. That's the most expensive shirt I've ever bought for myself. And I got it from a homie of mine. It was on my 21st birthday at Rose Bowl. So like Rose Bowl happened on my birthday that year. I made a bunch of money and I bought a bunch of shit. I bought like 10 Nirvana tees that day, like to flip. And then my homie, like, he was like, yo, it's your birthday. Like, I'll hook you up. Like, I got you. And he sold it to me for like $500 and I'll never sell it.
Crazy.
Yeah. And then we went out and got like super fucking drunk. Like, cause it was my 21st birthday. Like we got like super fucked up.
Taryn, ThriftLord, you know this just as well as anyone does. Bins culture is insane. There's people vying for each other's spots. There's people undercutting each other. It's turned vintage friends to vintage enemies. Tell me a little bit about your experience at the bins and give me your ultimate insight as to what the landscape of the bins culture and bins around the country look like right now.
So recently, I haven't been to bins as much, but I mean, I think I spent enough time in enough bins locations to like really get the vibes around like different, like whether it's like how many kids are at the bins at one time or like just the way they rotate. Like I feel like a lot of different components go into how bins operate. And when you take something like LA bins to where it's like, yeah, the bins is like pretty a good size. They do a lot of rotations, but there's so many heads that it's like, I mean, a lot of people like they do this to eat. So like at one point you're gonna have to be like, fuck you, like I'm getting shit. And I mean, I've taken shit in front of people. People have taken shit in front of me. Like I've gotten mad at people and yelled at people, and people have gotten mad and yelled at me and cussed me out and whatever. Like it's one of those things that like, I mean, you're at a fucking $2 a pound thrift store. Like you're gonna have to get used to causing some issues. Like it's just how it is.
Some of your critics would say that you have a monopoly over the bins in whatever geographic location you're currently in.
No. I mean, I haven't bought from the bins in forever. At one point, like, I guess when I was like traveling a lot and like buying from a lot of different bins, like I wouldn't call it a monopoly, but like I think my Instagram was big enough to where people wanted to like sell to me, and it just became a thing that like whenever I would pull up to a new city, if I like posted and like people wanted to sell shit, like they'd bring me stuff to sell and I would buy it. So
did you ultimately create this problem through your Instagram? Did you kind of expose the bins to the general public?
I don't know about general public. Like, I definitely probably attributed to like bins becoming a more known thing because like I was doing bin picks like in 2017, like early days. And then, I mean, it's no different than like the same thing happened with rag houses with me. Like, I started posting rag houses and then rag houses became like a fucking big thing. But I mean, it's kind of just one of those things that like, if I would have never posted any of those things, like I would probably never be where I am today. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword to where it's like, yeah, like I kind of blew out spots like for myself and other people. But at the same time, like if I didn't do it, somebody else was going to do it. So it's kind of like, I mean, we're talking about like business. So you got to do your thing.
Let's actually talk about rag houses. Taryn, you're the rag house king. How easy is it to get into a rag house?
It's not easy. People that like tell you it's simple, it's not. Like they're just, I feel like anyone acting like they really know, like they don't know. Like, cause there's rag houses in a lot of places, but like so many rag houses are like fully locked down by the people that are buying from them that it's like any rag house that you can get away with just walking into and like looking around and buying stuff, like they're either just trying to finesse you for like whatever amount of money you're willing to spend at that given time, or like it's a garbage spot anyways. And it's just kind of one of those things that it's like you have to really, like some people love to say like, oh, if you go with money, like if you go with like a bunch of money, like you'll get it. And it's like, no, it's not that simple. I also can't speak for like places in like Canada or like Florida or anything like that. I would assume they kind of operate in the same boundaries, but like you have to have like actual relationships with these owners. Like before I finally got like warehouse owners to sell me everything that they got, like it took me years. Like I would have to go every day for a year, buy like one bale that they'd sell me, and they would sell me the shitty bales, like the garbage ones that like they want to get money. So it's like they'll sell you like some real garbage shit, like stuff that like literally you could be digging and like you throw it all back, they rebale it, and then they'll sell it to me because like they'll just take the free money. And you have to play that game for a long time. Like it doesn't, you could go in there with 30 grand and be like, I have 30 grand, like sell me everything. They're still gonna sell you a bunch of bullshit. And then if you keep going and keep doing that, maybe, but that's you establishing your relationship with them. So it's not as simple as everyone likes to act like it is.
Best tips to establish that relationship?
There is no best tips.
Curious, a few months ago there was an event that happened within the vintage Instagram community where a couple dealers basically were selling rag house information that they felt might be useful to other people within the space. I'm curious, should that information be readily available, number one? And number two, does it even matter if it is?
That whole thing was like, I mean, I personally know like the entire situation because it happened like in like my area of like where my rags are. That whole thing was fake for one. The
list or?
Yeah, like it was like they were just, some shit happened in the warehouse that they bought in, and it was like a petty, like they got mad, so like they were gonna blow out the spot, and then the warehouse owner found out and like threatened to like fucking sue them and like all this shit. Like that's why it never happened, because like the warehouse owner was like, I'll make sure you never step foot in another rag house in Texas again. And like that's why it never happened, and like they never had the information to begin with. But if I think like, I don't think it should be available. I mean, and that's not me gatekeeping. Actually, yeah, like you can say it's me gatekeeping. Like, and to me, it's like business and relationships and knowing how to do shit is valuable. And it's like, I think people in vintage, and I think, yeah, I just think a lot of like people in vintage are very entitled to shit. Like, as fucked up as that sounds. Like, I've done this a long time. I've dealt with a lot of fucking entitled people, and people act like just because the information, like just because somebody else has the information, that they deserve the information as well. But at the same time, like all those people, if they had that information, they wouldn't know what to do with it. So it's like, I don't think it should be available because it protects the people that worked hard to gain that information and build their business and they're making money. And then also like those people that want the information, they're not going to be able to do anything with it. Like even if they had it, like you can't teach somebody to have a work ethic. Like you can't teach somebody to have drive. You can't teach somebody how to be good at business. Like you can't teach somebody how to like take risks on themselves. So it's like, and that's what Rag Houses truly is like, you're taking a fucking risk. Like it's expensive. You have to build relationships. You have to invest a lot of money into relationships. 90% of the spots are fucking terrible. Like you're gonna lose a lot of money until you find that one spot. And then you have to hope that that guy will have a loyal relationship to you, which they won't. And people act like it's fucking easy, and it's not easy. And the people that worked hard and figured it out and like made it work, they don't owe you that shit. Period. Like,
we're here signing out with Taryn, the Thrift Lord. Taryn, thanks so much for your time. Before we check out, anything you want to add about the collection, when there's going to be a drop date, what you're going to be dropping?
Okay. The first collection is going to be Carhartt work pants, not all double knees, so single knees, like denim, like just really nice Carhartt pants. It's going to be most likely, we haven't picked an exact date yet, but it's going to be like mid to late October, probably later October. But for sure in there, and we're going to be unveiling like the new website with it, and the website's going to be fucking dope. It's going to be something that like, that's honestly probably one of my favorite parts about the whole thing. But yeah, the first drop, Carhartt work pants. I'll give away the second drop for y'all. It's going to be t-shirts. You guys can have the first inside scoop with it.
Date in mind on the first drop? Do you have a day?
I don't have a date in mind. Just be aware on like Instagram. I'll post it in my story once like we have the exact date. Like we want to kind of build up hype, and we don't want people to like tell people a date and like they forget about it. Like it'll probably be like a week or two before the drop day happens. I'll announce a date and just be on the lookout for that. We're also going to be giving away a couple pairs on Ezze. Probably like same day or a couple days later. They're going to be given away for free. They're just going to be flash posted and like $0. Go get them. Be on the lookout for that as well. I'm sure London will post more information with that.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Taryn. Everyone stay tuned. Keep in the loop on the ThriftLord IG, the Bidstitch IG, and the Ezze IG. We'll be giving out a lot more information and details soon. We're checking out from here. Thanks, guys.